She left her wedding ring in the sink. Not in a box. Not in a drawer. Just there, like a used spoon. No note. No bag packed. Just a text 30 minutes after walking out. I'm staying with him for now, but I'll come back soon. This won't break us. She called it a pause. I called it abandonment. She didn't block me. She messaged every morning like we were still married. Sent photos of coffee mugs, clouds from her morning jog. Once even a playlist called Almost Home. Her version of cheating was poetic, apparently. I didn't answer. Not once. Instead, I transformed the apartment. Took 3 days off work. Turned our home into something unrecognizable. I tore down the curtains she picked. Smashed every picture frame. Burned the bedspread we bought in Maine. I painted the bedroom wall black. Not out of rage, but because it didn't deserve light anymore. Then I started printing. I printed every message she'd sent me since the day we met. Every I love you. Every always yours. Every forever, even when we fight. I printed the photo she once took of us asleep, arms tangled, timestamp still on it. I printed the poem she wrote for me the day after our wedding. I printed the email she accidentally left open on the iPad, the one where she wrote to him. He's kind, safe, but I crave the fire. That one I printed 10 times. By the time she returned, the entire living room was papered in our history. She walked in at 6:43 p.m. I didn't speak. She didn't either. She took 2 steps inside. Saw the first wall, the words, the timeline, her betrayal echoing back at her from every surface. She collapsed. No scream, no gasp, just knees to floor. A soft thud. She tried to speak, but nothing came out. And I stood there, holding the last page I hadn't taped up, the one that simply said, "You said you'd come back." So I waited. She dropped to her knees like the air had been sucked from her lungs. For a second, I thought she'd fainted, but she was fully conscious, her wide eyes scanning the walls, her lips slightly parted, trembling as if her body couldn't decide whether to scream or sob. Her knees made a dull thud against the hardwood, and then, silence. The same silence I'd been living in for 22 days. I didn't move. I didn't help her up. I just stood across the room, holding that last page, the only one I hadn't taped. I could hear her breath, jagged and shaky, filling the space between us. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, or maybe that was new. I couldn't tell. She looked older. Or maybe I'd just never seen her look this small before. "Elliot," she finally whispered. It was the first time she'd said my name out loud since she left. She reached out a hand toward me, but it froze mid-air, as if even she wasn't sure if she deserved the gesture. I didn't speak. I wanted to know how long it would take before she broke her own silence with the truth. She tried to stand, but her heels slipped on a printed sheet. One of the texts she'd sent me a year ago, the one where she said I was the only person who ever made her feel safe. I watched her kneel among her own words like a criminal forced to read their confession out loud in court. "Why? Why would you do this?" she asked, her voice raspy, like her throat had closed halfway through the sentence. Her eyes darted around the room, trying to process it all. The living room covered in her affection, the hallway wallpapered with our late-night chats, the bedroom door framed with pictures of the vacation she said was the happiest she'd ever felt. She looked like someone standing in the middle of a crime scene, and in a way she was. I finally spoke. Quietly. "You told me this wouldn't break us. But you broke every part of me before you even walked out the door." She shook her head violently. "It wasn't supposed to go like this. I was confused. I was staying with your lover," I said flatly. "That's what you texted." She pressed her lips together and looked down at the floor, where another page had landed, the one that said, "He doesn't make me laugh like you do." The irony was so loud I almost laughed myself. "I came back to talk. To fix it," she said. "No, you came back because he stopped being exciting." I snapped. "You came back because he wasn't built for the aftermath. Because he never planned to keep you." She flinched like I'd slapped her. For a second, I felt something. Maybe guilt, maybe regret, but it passed. Because she needed to feel it. All of it. "I didn't sleep with him right away," she mumbled. "I swear, not until I realized. I don't care when you slept with him, Corinne. I care that you left like it was nothing. I care that you texted me smiley faces while lying in his bed." She stood up, finally. She was unsteady, her body trembling, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. "I want to come home. Please. I was wrong." A bitter smile crept across my face. She thought this was still her home. That's what made it almost funny. I stepped aside and gestured toward the hallway. Not toward the bedroom, but toward the guest room. Her suitcase was already sitting there. I'd found it in the attic, packed it myself. 2 outfits, a toothbrush, and the ring she left in the sink. It sat on top of everything like a warning label. She looked at it and froze again. "You don't sleep in our bed anymore," I said. "Not until I understand what you came back for. And not until I decide if I even want you here." She blinked hard, tears finally spilling over. I didn't offer her a tissue. I just turned away and walked back into the living room, where her words were still screaming at her from every wall. And behind me, I heard her whisper something that made my stomach twist. "Please don't make me go back to him." But I wasn't going to answer. Not yet. I didn't answer her right away. I just stood there with my back to her, staring at the coffee table covered in memories I hadn't touched in weeks. The coasters we bought on our trip to Vermont, the book she never finished, the candle she swore smelled like our first apartment. I listened to her breath catch as she realized I wasn't rushing to comfort her. I always used to. That was the old me. "Please don't make me go back to him," she repeated, voice thinner now, like it might disintegrate if she spoke any louder. I turned to look at her, finally. Her arms were wrapped around herself, eyes wide with something far deeper than guilt. It wasn't just regret. It was fear. "Why?" I asked flatly. "You left willingly. You stayed with him for almost a month. You said it wouldn't break us. So why does going back scare you now?" Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. She looked at the guest room door, then back at me, then down at the floor like it might give her an answer she could live with. "I thought I had control," she said finally, voice shaking. "I thought I was experimenting with a life I wasn't sure I wanted. But Travis, he isn't who I thought he was. Not even close." I laughed under my breath. "You mean he wasn't the fantasy? He didn't play guitar in the morning and whisper affirmations into your neck?" She didn't flinch at the sarcasm. That's what stopped me cold. She just stood there, pale, shrinking, like someone whose reality had shifted in ways she didn't have words for yet. "What did he do?" I asked. The tone in my voice changed. I hated that it did. She hesitated, swallowed hard. "He said if I left him, he'd ruin you." The room went dead quiet. Even Luther, still crated in the hallway, stopped shifting around. My jaw tightened. "What?" She nodded slowly. "He's not just some flirty exec. He's vindictive, controlling. He found your old texts. The ones where you vented about your school job, the student fights, your boss. He said he could send them to the district board, spin it like you're unfit. He even said he could fabricate screenshots if he needed to. Said it would be easy. He has the resources." I took a step forward. "And why would he do that?" Her voice cracked. "Because I told him I didn't love him. Because I said your name in my sleep. Because he said if he couldn't have me, no one could." I stared at her, my pulse pounding in my ears. "You're lying," I said, not even sure if I believed it or just needed to believe it. She took out her phone, unlocked it, and held it out to me. There were messages. Dozens of them. Threats. Screenshots. A voice note where his voice sounded like silk wrapped around a knife. I scrolled in silence. My hands were trembling. "You stayed with him for 3 weeks. While he was saying this to you?" I asked. "I was afraid," she whispered. "At first I thought I could manage him. Then I realized I couldn't. But if I came back to you too fast, I was afraid he'd take it out on you." A sickening chill spread through my chest. My wife had betrayed me, then protected me, then begged for a way out. And now she was standing in our apartment like a shell of the woman I once knew, with no ring on her hand and a war in her eyes. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to scream, to break something, to tell her to get out and never come back. But part of me, the part she used to love, just stood there, wondering how much of her was still salvageable. She moved closer. "Please don't hate me," she whispered. "I don't need forgiveness. I just need somewhere safe." And even though my heart was shattered in 1,000 directions, I said the only thing I could. "You're not going back to him." She nodded, tears spilling freely now. But as I walked past her to close the front door, I saw something that made my stomach drop. Across the street, parked in a silver sedan, someone was watching the apartment. And he wasn't even trying to hide it. I didn't say anything. Not right away. I just stood by the door, staring through the blinds at the silver sedan across the street. It was angled in the kind of way that didn't look accidental, like whoever parked it wanted a clear view of our living room window. Of her. He was in the driver's seat. Dark clothes. One hand resting on the wheel, the other holding something I couldn't see clearly. A phone maybe. Or a recorder. It doesn't matter. The way he looked at our building made it clear he wasn't just passing time. He was waiting for something. Or someone. Corinne, I said without turning around. Did you tell him you were coming here today? She didn't answer immediately. That hesitation, that half-second pause, made my stomach twist. I said I needed space, she finally muttered. I told him I needed to think, that I wasn't sure about anything anymore. And did he believe you? I don't know, she whispered. I shut the blinds carefully and turned to face her. She was clutching her phone like it was a lifeline, her knuckles pale from the pressure. I could see it on her face, the realization that she hadn't outsmarted him, that he'd let her go not because he believed her, but because he was still in control. He's not going to hurt you, I said, even though I had no idea if that was true. You're not going back there. And you're not staying here like this, hiding and waiting for him to knock. Her eyes darted to the hallway. What are you saying? I'm saying if he thinks this apartment is where you ran to, we need to make sure it's the last place he checks again. She shook her head. No, I'm not ready to go anywhere. I just got here. Exactly, I interrupted. You just got here. And already he's parked across the street. I don't know when it happened. Maybe during the weeks I spent alone, or maybe just now. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just heartbroken anymore. I was angry. Not screaming angry. Not throwing things angry. But clear angry. The kind that cuts sharper than rage. We're going to my cousin's place, I told her. Upstate. No social media. No emails. You're turning off your phone. You'll use mine if you need anything. She looked at me like I'd slapped her. I'm not a fugitive, Elliot. No, I said. You're worse. You're bait. Her expression crumbled. That's not fair. Fair left the moment you walked out that door and moved into his. She turned away, wiping her face with her sleeve. I just wanted to feel alive again. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was the most brutally honest thing she'd said since she walked back in. And maybe I needed to hear it, that it had nothing to do with me being a bad husband. She just wanted to burn something down to watch the flames. I started packing while she stood frozen in the living room. Just the essentials, a change of clothes, chargers, dog leash, cash, old IDs. Luther barked once from his crate, as if sensing something was off. I let him out. He bolted straight to Corinne, tail wagging like she hadn't shattered everything. Dogs are stupid like that. Or maybe they're better than us. We left through the back door, slipped into my car in the alley. I circled around the block twice just to make sure we weren't being followed. By the time we hit the freeway, she hadn't said a word in 30 minutes. She just stared out the window, jaw clenched, holding Luther in her lap, like he was the only thing anchoring her to the world. I drove, and for a moment, just a flicker, I wondered what would have happened if I hadn't seen that car. If I'd just taken her back like nothing happened. If I'd slept beside her again, trusting her breath in the dark while someone else watched us from across the street. But then my phone buzzed in the console. Blocked number. No ringtone. Just one new voicemail. And when I opened it, the voice on the other end was calm, amused, and chilling. Nice little road trip you're taking. Shame about your job if you don't come back by Monday. I didn't show it to her. Not yet. Because something told me that was only the beginning. We drove through the night. I didn't turn on the radio. I didn't ask if she was okay. I didn't need to. Her silence was loud enough to fill the entire car. Somewhere around exit 41, she fell asleep with Luther curled in her lap, her cheek pressed against the window like a child on a long ride home. I watched the sky shift from ink black to bruised blue. It didn't feel like morning. It felt like another layer of the nightmare unfolding. When we finally pulled into my cousin's driveway, Corinne hadn't spoken in nearly 5 hours. The gravel crunched beneath the tires like bones snapping. Trees surrounded the little cabin like guards. Dense, tall, indifferent. No neighbors. No traffic. Just wind and birds and the faint sound of my heartbeat in my ears. Sammy wasn't home. I'd texted him from a burner app, and he left the key taped under the grill. Inside, everything was coated in that cozy rural stillness. Plaid blankets. A chipped mug that read, "Barely awake." A dusty bookshelf filled with paperbacks no one had read in a decade. It was the safest place I could think of, but I still couldn't breathe. Corinne walked in behind me, blinking like she hadn't seen sunlight in weeks. She didn't ask where we were. She didn't ask why we were here. She just dropped her bag on the couch and sat on the floor, her arms around her knees. Luther laid beside her, resting his head in her lap like nothing had changed. And for a moment, I wanted to believe that this was over, that we could just stay here, that he wouldn't follow us. But then I remembered the voicemail. I hadn't shown it to her. Not yet. Not until I was sure she'd tell me what she was hiding. I poured coffee, the bitter kind that makes your stomach fold, and handed her a cup. She took it without looking at me. I sat across from her on the floor. "We're not going back," I said. She nodded once. "And I need to know everything. No half-truths. No deflections. What did you give him, Corinne?" She looked up, eyes red. "What do you mean? What access? What files? What passwords? You said he could ruin me. That doesn't come from pillow talk. That comes from evidence. Or leverage." She stared at the fireplace. For a long time. Then, finally, she spoke. "He asked me once to borrow your laptop. Just to check something," he said. Said he didn't trust public Wi-Fi. I wasn't thinking. You let him into my accounts." "No, I didn't give him anything. But I think he installed something. A tracker. Maybe a keylogger. I didn't realize it until I saw your old emails in his drafts." My hands started shaking. I set the mug down before I crushed it. "You let him into my ****ing laptop," I said, trying not to yell but failing miserably. "I didn't know what he was doing," she snapped. "I thought he was just being paranoid. I didn't think he'd—" "Of course you didn't think," I said, standing up. "You thought you were chasing excitement, fire, freedom, and you walked us into a war." She didn't argue. She just sat there, drowning in the weight of what she'd done. I went into the kitchen and pulled out my phone. I opened the voicemail again, hit play, and walked back into the room with the speaker on full volume. His voice filled the silence. "Nice little road trip you're taking. Shame about your job if you don't come back by Monday." Corinne's face drained of all color. "You don't know him," she whispered. "You don't know what he's capable of." "Neither do you," I snapped. "But you invited him in any way." And that's when her phone vibrated. Once, twice, then again. 3 messages, all from an unknown number. She didn't want to show me. I grabbed the phone from her lap. The first message was a picture of me, leaving the apartment 2 days ago. Same clothes, same angle as where the silver sedan had been parked. The second message was a picture of my classroom. The front entrance. Students blurred, but recognizable. He'd been there. The third message wasn't a photo. It was a sentence. "Run wherever you want. You brought her back. That's all I need." I didn't sleep that night. Because the game wasn't about jealousy anymore. It was about punishment. And he'd already decided we were both guilty. I didn't sleep. Not even for a second. I sat on the edge of that lumpy cabin couch with my eyes locked on the front door, one hand holding a fire poker and the other gripping my phone, refreshing every app one thought might show a trace of him. News alerts, security cams I had forgotten to disable, even the weather. Anything. The night outside looked quiet, but my chest didn't believe it. Corinne had dozed off sometime after 2 a.m., curled up in a blanket with Luther pressed against her legs, like they were hiding from a storm we couldn't see yet. She twitched in her sleep. Every few minutes, her face would tense like she was having arguments in her dreams. I wanted to feel sympathy. I really did. But all I could think about was the last 2 years of my life being picked apart by a man I'd never even met. All because she wanted to feel alive again. At 4:12 a.m., the cabin's power cut out. No warning. No flicker. Just total black. I froze. I didn't say a word. Just stood and moved toward the fireplace where my cousin kept an old emergency flashlight wedged behind a pile of unused logs. The air shifted around me. Still, but charged. The kind of silence you get right before something awful happens. I grabbed the flashlight, flipped the switch, and it didn't turn on. Dead batteries. I reached for my phone, but the screen was already dimming, 4% battery left. And of course, no service. No Wi-Fi. No signal. The perfect little dead zone we'd escaped to had turned into a trap. Then came the sound. Not a bang. Not glass breaking. A tap. 3 soft taps against the window. I moved toward it slowly, heart thudding like a kick drum, fire poker tight in my grip. The blinds were down, but I could see the faintest silhouette. A figure, tall, motionless, staring in. I held my breath and waited. No movement. No speech. Just him. Watching. Corinne stirred on the couch and sat up with a gasp, like she felt it through her spine. "What's happening?" she whispered. I didn't answer. I pulled her up by the arm and motioned for silence. She clutched Luther and followed me into the bathroom, the only room with no windows. I locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and crouched with her behind the tub. My phone buzzed. Block number again. One new message. Told you I don't bluff. Open the door, Elliot. She saw the screen and let out a tiny, involuntary sob. I didn't think he'd find us this fast, she whispered. He doesn't usually do this kind of thing himself. He pays people. He doesn't leave the city. Then why is he here? I snapped, whispering through clenched teeth. She shook her head, panicked. I don't know. Maybe because I didn't tell him about the cabin. Maybe because I didn't beg. There it was. The truth under the truth. She hadn't just walked away. She hadn't groveled. She hadn't given him the ending he wanted. And men like that, they don't like loose ends. I knew I had one chance to shift this. One shot to change the script. I opened my cousin's cabinet and found an old, dusty flare gun. Emergency supply. Still loaded. Still operable. I cracked the door open just an inch and aimed out through the front screen window. The figure was gone. Not a trace. But something had been left behind. On the porch sat a single manila envelope. Inside it, I would later find out, were 10 printed photos. All of them recent. All of them taken from somewhere impossibly close. One was of me teaching in class last Friday. One was of Corinne buying groceries a week before she left. 2 were of us sleeping, from behind the bedroom window. But the last one, it made my knees buckle. It was a picture of Luther. From inside our living room. Taken during a week after she'd already moved in with him. He'd been inside our home. While I was still sleeping under the illusion of marriage. Corinne looked at the photo. Then at me. Then at the floor. He said he had a copy of the key, she murmured. I didn't believe him. I thought he was just trying to scare me. You were wrong. She didn't defend herself. She just sat down and said the thing I'd been feeling since we left the apartment. I don't think we're going to survive this. The moment I saw the photo of our dog from inside the house, something in me cracked, but it didn't break the way you'd expect. It didn't turn into panic. It turned into precision. The kind of numb calculation you only feel after being hurt so many times that pain becomes just another sound in the room. I sat down on the cold tile floor next to Corinne and the envelope full of surveillance, and said, almost calmly, "You're going to tell me everything. Now." She didn't cry. She didn't run. She just stared at the floor for a long moment before whispering, "His real name isn't Travis." I blinked slowly. What? He changed it 2 years ago, she continued, her voice hollow. He was in a different industry before marketing. Something offshore. Something with data. I didn't ask questions at first. I thought it was just another name in his reinvention story. I didn't move. My fingers were numb, but my heart was pounding like a warning bell. You mean to tell me you were living with a man for weeks and didn't know his real name? She finally looked at me. I knew. I just didn't want to know what it meant. I stood up and backed away from her like she was a loaded weapon. What does it mean, Corinne? Because the guy who left that photo wasn't trying to get you back. He was marking territory. He was proving something. This isn't about romance or rejection anymore. This is about ownership. She stood, shakily, and pulled something from her purse. A flash drive. No label. Just matte black plastic and silence. I found this in his desk the night before I left. I didn't open it. I didn't even know I took it until I got back and unpacked. I stared at the drive in her palm like it might explode. You think that's why he's following us? I asked. You think that's what he wants? Her voice was quiet. I think. I was the distraction. But you were always the threat. You knew too much, even when you didn't realize it. You're the guy who backed up every file. Who kept every password. He thinks you could expose something. And now with this drive, he's sure of it. I didn't even remember backing up anything related to him. But I'm a creature of habit. I save everything. Old text logs, archived emails, cloud backups, offline mirrors of accounts I no longer use. Maybe I saw something. Maybe I clicked the wrong link at the right time. We plugged the flash drive into my cousin's ancient laptop, and for 5 seconds, nothing happened. Then a folder popped up. It was labeled with just one word. Civic. Inside were hundreds of files. Some documents, some videos, some that wouldn't open at all. But what I could see was enough to confirm the worst. Financial records, fake shell company registrations, screenshots of conversations with corporate officers whose names I recognized from the news. Offshore accounts. Confidential agreements that had no business being on a marketing executive's personal machine. And then a list of names. Not employees. Not clients. Witnesses. One of the names on the list? Mine. It wasn't just a revenge story. It was a cleanup operation. She stood behind me as I scrolled through the folder, hands shaking. I think I was the insurance policy, she said finally. He knew if I got close to you and kept you calm, you'd never dig. He probably never thought I'd actually fall for him. And when I did, and then walked away, it made things messy. I laughed bitterly. Messy. That's one word for it. Then her voice dropped. He warned me once, you know, a long time ago. Said if you ever found out, you'd either disappear quietly or be made to disappear. She started crying again. But this time, I didn't reach for her. Because I had a new realization, something darker than anything she'd said. I wasn't sure anymore if she had come back out of guilt, or because she knew she needed my help to stay alive. The line between villain and victim had started to blur, and I was starting to wonder if I'd ever been anything more than a chess piece on someone else's board. I didn't sleep that night either, but it wasn't fear keeping me up this time. It was focus. Cold, clear, almost surgical. For the first time since this started, I saw everything for what it was. Not just betrayal or obsession or control, but a puzzle. And I'm good with puzzles. Always have been. While Corinne sat curled on the couch, her face pale and hollow, I went through every file on the flash drive, matching names, decoding patterns, cross-referencing public scandals with the private records in front of me. What I found wasn't just incriminating. It was nuclear. He'd been laundering money through ghost charities, creating fake client accounts to inflate profit reports, selling proprietary data to foreign companies under fake consultancy agreements. It went deeper than we ever imagined, and he'd kept everything encrypted and hidden until Corinne unknowingly walked out with his dead man switch. By morning, I had a plan. I didn't want revenge. I wanted a record. We drove to the nearest town, 30 miles of winding roads and no signal. At the library, I used a clean computer to create a secure dump of everything on the drive, uploading it anonymously to 3 places: a whistleblower law firm, a financial crimes journalist I remembered from a podcast, and a federal fraud tip line, all with time-stamped screenshots and metadata intact. I attached a simple message. This man has evaded justice for years. Not anymore. Attached is everything you need. EM. I didn't include Corinne's name. I didn't need to. She'd already paid in other ways. By the time we returned to the cabin, it had started snowing. Soft, clean, silent, like the world was pressing reset. Corinne looked at me like she wasn't sure what came next. You think that'll be enough? She asked, voice barely a whisper. No, I said honestly. But it'll be more than he expects. I watched the mailbox the next 3 days. No one came. No car returned. No knocks in the night. And then, on the 4th morning, I woke up to a headline. Tech exec under federal investigation for multi-million-dollar fraud ring. Anonymous tip sparks full-scale investigation. His photo was right there, clean-cut, confident, cold. But his eyes? Those weren't the eyes of someone in control anymore. They were cornered. Corinne stared at the screen, her hand over her mouth. Is this real? Very, I said. And I kept backups in 6 places. If he so much as breathes in our direction again, the rest will go public. She started crying. Not the guilty, panicked tears I'd seen for weeks. These were different. Quiet. Slow. Like something inside her had finally exhaled after holding its breath for too long. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, looking out the window. But thank you. For saving me anyway. I sat down beside her. I didn't touch her hand. But I didn't leave either. We don't have to go back to what we were, I told her. But we get to decide what comes next. Not him. Not fear. She nodded. And for the first time in what felt like years, we shared a silence that wasn't heavy. That night, I took Luther out to the porch. The snow had settled thick on the trees, muting the world into stillness. I looked up at the stars, not searching for answers, just feeling them. We weren't running anymore. We weren't hiding. We were rebuilding, slow, broken, but free. And somehow, in the quiet of that little cabin in the woods, after all the damage, after the betrayal and fear and truth, we had survived. Together.